As one of your final questions in this week's study noted, many of us are so unaccustomed to distinguishing our true self from our false self that it may seem difficult to know where to begin. For this reason, the life of David is such a gift to us. David had to cut through 3 obstacles to be his authentic self in God in this study, and so must we. The first was his family. He was the youngest of 8 boys. His 3 oldest brothers were in the army. Eliab, the oldest, was probably 10 to 15 years older than him. So they have a great deal of authority over him. At this moment in 1 Samuel 17, he is not receiving support from his father or his 7 older brothers. His brothers judge him as conceited and wicked and give him their very intense anger. David's misunderstood, he's slandered, he's ignored, disregarded, put down. Their message to him is simply, "You're a nobody, you're useless, go home." So often our families, even the best of them, often add layers of a false self that smother our true selves. And often we grow up in families and cultures where certain true parts of us are not acceptable. Parts of us get cut off or surrendered or buried. David also cut through a second obstacle, that of Saul. Saul was the king and the older person in authority who had much more experience than him. Saul had led an army of 330,000 soldiers before this moment, and he had emerged victorious. He had experience. He was famous. And Saul says to David, "You're not able to do this. You're only a boy." I would have been overwhelmed and said, "You're right. I can't. You know, what should we do?" In fact, the whole army of Israel had been trained and had experience in battle. Yet they're frightened and in the trenches, not living by faith. David had never even been in the army. David was expected to wear Saul's armor. That's the way everyone fought wars in Israel. So when King Saul tried to give him his armor and weapons, who wouldn't want them? David tried walking around in them, but he realized, "I cannot go in these." The point is, everyone is giving him advice. The third obstacle was the massive challenge of Goliath. Goliath cursed him, "You will die." Goliath despised him. He threatened him with horrific consequences, saying, "If you try to change, if you come out here and be your authentic self, you will die. This will be a disaster for you." Goliath is utterly sure of himself. God is irrelevant to him. But David, as a young man, he knows himself. And he knows God, a powerful combination. He cuts through this obstacle as well, through his authentic self in the living God. He takes off Saul's armor. He goes out with his 5 stones and slingshot. His guidance comes from the inside, from God's Spirit inside of him, not external authority. In the same way, the Holy Spirit lives inside us as well. The time between his taking off Saul's armor, he's pondering, God didn't make me this way. How am I going to do this in a way that fits me? In this case, David gets counsel from Saul, his brothers, and Goliath, but he actually goes against it. They do not see what David sees, the living God. A note here, God does give us the gift of common sense. It's common sense for David not to fight Goliath using a sword. To go up against Goliath's physical strength would have been fatal. But what changes things is that David has slingshot skills. You see, this is not a size war, but a differentiation issue. David has strengths that he is bringing to the battle. He knows what they are. He knows who he is as a shepherd over sheep, who has, at least up to this point, seen God's faithfulness in his killing of the lion and the bear. He's looking at God and he's looking at himself. In 1 Samuel 17, 45 to 47, David says to Goliath, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." David is true to himself and to God. The result is that David brings down Goliath, and the whole nation of Israel is richly blessed and emerges victorious. God is glorified. and the whole world knows the God of Israel. When we have the courage to be the unique persons God has made us to be, one of the fruits of this will be that the world will encounter the living God as well. David has a massive resource beyond his own power that operates for him. That is the powerful living God of Israel. So do we. So do you. This is God's invitation for you today, because when we are not true to ourselves, we are not true to God. David's high level of differentiation enables him to be a leader like Israel never experienced in their history. He later becomes king and moves Israel into an expressive, dynamic worship of God unlike anything they'd ever seen before, with singers and dancing. He ends up writing a whole worship manual called the Psalms. These are songs and prayers that continue to be used by millions of people around the world to this very day. Think with me about a few of the qualities of David's true self that serve as a model for us from this passage. He knows he's loved by God and does not inappropriately borrow that love from others. He makes decisions out of a lived experience of God, not just head knowledge. He functions as an inner-directed adult who has left his family of origin. He moves as a person deeply in tune with himself. He's genuinely concerned with God's glory, not his own. He's a non-anxious presence. He's not reactive or easily triggered. He's deeply aware of who he is and who he's not. He's respectful of authority, yet able to speak clearly, honestly, and respectfully on his own behalf. He's able to draw on his past successes and apply them to his present challenges. Now remember, we have only one you. You are unrepeatable. You were created to be a gift to the world. God has a unique purpose and mission for you. Whether you be like David, a young adult in this text, or Daniel, a teenager, or the 12 disciples who were also young, or Abraham, who was 75, or Moses at age 80. The greatest gift you can give the world is you. So let me invite you this coming week, before your next meeting, to read the next chapter, chapter 3, in the Emotionally Healthy Spirituality book called Going Back to Go Forward. And you will see how this builds on what we've learned in this session. And I want to encourage you to meet with God each day in week 2 in this Emotionally Healthy Spirituality day-by-day devotional. And as you'll see, each devotional will expand on what you've learned here today. Enjoy.